Our third point is kind of an interesting conversation. I really went back and forth on whether or not I even wanted to bring this up. It gets into a little bit dicey water, and this kind of could be put under the umbrella of like, why should we even care about this? And why should we even talk about this? But I do think that it says something significant about why relationships require selflessness as like a key underlying value. So it just came out recently that Al Pacino, the famous actor, he's known for being very manic sometimes in some of his scenes. He's beloved, he's kind of one of the all-time greats. Al Pacino, who's now 82 years old, which is mind-boggling to me. He recently got his 28-year-old girlfriend pregnant. Okay, so there's a lot there. I think she's 29 now, but she was 28 when she got pregnant. So number one, he's 82 and she's 28, which is literally like each other's numbers backwards. It's a massive, massive, like almost 60-year age difference here. And the feeling, like as soon as anyone hears that, is a combination of feelings, like shock, like, okay, wow. For some people, it is just a natural disgust. Just feels wrong. There's something that really breaks a social norm there. It breaks social expectations. But does that mean it's bad? Like, is there anything that would fall under like immorality here, or anything that really gives us a position to judge this in any way? A few reasons that people have a natural reaction to this is, number one, this is somewhat commonplace, but it's only commonplace really in one specific area, and that's with famous or wealthy people. That's it. So you don't really hear about beautiful 20-year-old women marrying 70 and 80-year-old, grocery store clerks. That doesn't really happen. You don't hear about 28-year-old women getting pregnant from 80-year-old retired postal workers. That's just not typically what happens. What you do see more common than you would imagine it should be is very young women marrying very old men who have a lot of money and a lot of power. And the reason that it just strikes us at kind of that level of concern or disgust is it just seems like an obvious power imbalance. It seems like there is a reason that they are going for this. And especially getting pregnant, it just kind of guarantees you a lot of Al Pacino's hundreds of millions of dollars someday. There is a part of men in particular, especially immature men, who see an 82-year-old pull a 28-year-old and kind of have some respect for that. Like, you know what, bro? Good for you, Al Pacino. I would think that's quite an immature response, but it is a response you're going to get for some men. Like, what a stud. 82, pulling a 28-year-old. Good for you. So I think that a lot of times the women, they get looked at in poor light. They get called a gold digger. I think women typically look at the older men in these situations with some level of disgust and just completely breaking all social norms. So how do we think about this? And there isn't an actual biblical injunction like thou shalt not marry someone who is 60 years younger than you. I would argue that it is somewhat implied in the general directions about marriage in Scripture, though. Like when Jesus talked about marriage in Matthew 19, he actually quoted from back in Genesis. He said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So for this reason, a man, that would be Al Pacino in this circumstance, will leave his father and mother to be united to his wife. Well, the problem with falling under these instructions when you're 82 years old is that your mother and father aren't alive anymore. They would be 576 years old. So it's kind of implied like this is something that you do younger and around similar ages. Now, Al Pacino is not actually married to this girl, which maybe opens a whole nother can of worms that we won't address today. But for relationships to be successful, one of the things that has to happen is you have to have this mutual respect and this mutual submission. And what mutual submission looks like is selflessness. Um, to be selfless is to put others' needs ahead of yours. And you have to do that to have a good relationship. You especially have to do that to be a good parent. And we know this now. There are exceptions to all norms. And a lot of times you have to make the absolute best with what you're given in life. So we know this statistically. The best possible case scenario is for kids to be raised by a mom and a dad. We just know that. I mean, fatherless homes correlate to every single issue that we don't want to see in society: drug use, incarceration, teenage pregnancy, dropping out of high school. All of the things that we don't want correlate strongly to fatherless homes. The best case scenario is for kids to be raised by a mom and a dad, and the normative scenario is for kids to be raised by a biological mom and a biological dad. That doesn't always work out. Um, I am a proud stepdad of 2 kids, and I love them and raise them like they're my own, and I'm an adoptive father of my daughter, and so those are unique circumstances that we feel called and led by God, and God, created this amazing family that I get to be in, where I get to play this role for kids who, aren't in that normative experience, but they are growing up with a mom and a dad. And selflessness thinks through that. Selflessness puts the needs of others first. And so for Al Pacino to be dating this very young woman, that's one issue. For them to now conceive a child together is another. And when you're 82 years old, statistically, you can be all but guaranteed you're not actually going to get to raise your child. You're not going to see them graduate high school. If Al Pacino sees his kid graduate high school, he will be 100 years old at that high school graduation. Generally, people don't live that old. I think the average age expectancy for men in America right now is 84 or 86, one of those two. So like 2 to 4 years older than Al Pacino is right now. And so you're bringing a kid into the world who you're all but guaranteed to have raised up with the scar of losing a parent very, very young. So does that mean you shouldn't do it? I don't know. I think it's definitely worth considering. And maybe they did consider all these things, and maybe they have a great plan in place. But it points to the fact that in our society, we don't allow for any kind of social norms. We don't like the conversation of what roles and responsibilities we are intended to carry as human beings. We see this on the other side of the spectrum, where it's kind of difficult to get mad at Al Pacino for starting a family in his 80s, because millennials will not start their families sometimes at all. They don't want to have kids. Young men don't want to get married until they're in their mid 30s, later 30s, around the same time that the women that they will be marrying have a significantly decreased chance of being able to get pregnant. And so we just have the Wall Street Journal put out this week. They put out the findings that our birth rate is just absolutely plummeting. We've been below replacement rate in America for a very, very long time. And we're on tracks to become like Japan, who has such a population decrease issue that without something changing, I mean, Japan, the Japanese people could cease to exist as a category in several generations. And we don't understand that the call is to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it, to go on the adventure of a lifetime, to find someone and marry them and get into a relationship that is your best chance of becoming the best version of yourself that you possibly can. And I do believe that there is a great category for singleness that is given to us in Scripture, but your singleness is aimed at increasing your capacity to build God's kingdom. That's not what we're seeing in society today. Our singleness is based on hedonism and our own search of pleasure, and not wanting to be tied down, and not wanting the responsibility of having to be faithful to someone, and not wanting to start a family because kids cost so much money and take so much of your time. And the people who have actually done this, who have settled down, all the statistics show that they're happier, they're less anxious, they make more money, they have more frequent sex and better sex than the single people who are out in the clubs every night. Like, there is nothing that can replace actually coming together and starting a family unit. And what we're called to do is leave our fathers and leave our mothers to gain our true independence by going into the world and starting our lives and potentially starting a family. And we've thrown all of those norms out the window. And so if you buy into the idea that we're just these free-floating people with no rights or responsibilities to anyone else or to society. We don't really have any kind of ethical or spiritual injunction to get married and stay married, to have kids and raise those kids. If you kind of buy into the idea that everyone gets to create their own reality and their own truth, then you have sawed off the branch you are sitting on. You've cut your legs out from under you to have anything negative to say about Al Pacino and his pregnant 29-year-old girlfriend. They have just kind of fit into this. There's really no one way. There's no right way. There's no norms. There's no responsibilities. In a world that is trying to tear down every societal role, responsibility, and norm, we just can't complain about these kinds of things. But if you have a biblical framework for how life is supposed to work, and if you're seeking to live that out, then you can pay attention to these things and have a point of contrast for them, how things are meant to be, intended to be. There is a created purpose, and this is the way that it works. And things like this will contrast to that. So all in all, I wish them the absolute best. I hope Al Pacino lives a very long time and gets to raise his kid. I hope the kid grows up and is happy and healthy and whole. This kid is coming into the world. So we can think whatever we want about it. I guess at the end of it all, congratulations to them. And for the rest of us, especially people who are still young, do not fall into the trap that you have no responsibility in this world, that there is no kinds of injunctions on you to be a real participator in what the world is becoming. The world needs young people to step up and take on responsibility and actually, create something with our lives, including for many of us, creating a family and loving our wives and staying faithful and raising kids and teaching them ancient wisdom and growing them into the next generation of young people who will be healthy and happy and impactful.